Okay, we're live. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Verdi Arbusto, and this is the Schumann Resonance Harmonics channel on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for being here. I just, as some of you know, I did the YouTube and the Facebook group to work together as a team. And somewhere in there is the link to the Facebook group. If you're new here, welcome. And I know a lot of you are coming from have come. Like pretty much my whole channel came from Wages World, with the few who had been given word of mouth or somewhere else that I posted. But pretty much the rest of you are from Wages. Blue Kool-Aid. You can drink. The Kool-Aid is safe to drink here as well. So thank you. And a lot of you have put that in the comments, that Wages sent you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate him still kind of kicking it to me that that I have something to share and that there is a message for you that's not just the Schumann resonances, but there's more to it than just that. So, if you are new here, again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. The more you interact with the channel, with all these channels, hit the bell for the notifications, get them all. That way you get updated on the posts. I do a lot of the community posts as well on all kinds of neat stuff. Some not necessarily related to the Schumann resonances, but it's all fun nonetheless. Um, so if you have if you've been around for a while and you are subscribed already, please remember to check to make sure you are still subscribed, because a lot of people talk about not getting the notifications that I have a live stream or premiere or whatever. And so part of what it is it's in the algorithm. As much as you interact with the channel, it percolates up in your recommendeds. So either you have to come over to my channel or you have to kind of keep active and then it'll pop up automatically. But make sure that the subscribe button is still, hit, and again, the little bell, the notifications are on the all. And I'm giving you some of my own personal expertise with YouTube and the algorithm of how it works. Okay, so it is the 27th of June at this point. We're almost into July, halfway through the year, It's gonna be different the second half of the year as more dust settles. Thank you for being here. I love giving you support. And so it was fairly nice out today. It was a little overcast, but it was very nice. Yesterday we had the memorial for my former manager at my work, and that was like he had a big crowd of people there who knew him, and so I was there for that. And I have footage video of some of that, and with the dance floor you can't see anything, but the music is good. I don't know, maybe I'll do this if I post this as a live stream. I will throw the video footage of um the dancing last night. For whatever you can see. It's not night vision, but whatever. All right. So it's fun. Want to have fun. Keep everything lively and upbeat. Positive. It's positive is not a message. It's how a message is delivered. There's no message called positive unless your subject is positive. You have to keep everything, even negative stuff that may not be fun to talk about. You have to give a positive look at it, that all hope is not lost. That's part of what we're trying to do here. I'm trying to do here, not just for you, but more for me first. If the people running the leaders lose faith, or we grow weary, who takes care of us? So part of it, me doing this, is I'm trying to connect with people in a positive way for us all to be able to deal with the changes in the electromagnetics. And it's a lot of these changes are not what people think they are, and it's actually even worse in some cases than people think it is. So and that's part of what I'm doing here, is I'm just giving you the technical. I have a lot of experience with how the Schumann resonances work, and so I'm trying to with electromagnetics, and I'm trying to give you the benefit of the electromagnetics, my experience with all of this stuff that relates to the training I've had and the on-the-job experience that I've had that relates to understanding a lot of the principles to electromagnetics and where it turns into gravity. The Schumann resonances are gravity. They're not rising. They're not bumping up. They're stable. And you can see right here, the Schumann resonances, these are stable. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do here, I have, this is the website, you know, and that wonderful kind of burgundy color that I have in the background, that dulcet burgundy color that I have. This is the website, and what I'm trying to do these days is work off of the website. So I post everything on the website. I get every day I get notifications that I have people subscribing. Thank you for being there. And so I want to post as much on the website. I can't post videos. There's just too much space the videos take. But I have more stuff that I want to do in the description over at my channel. And so that's kind of one of these things that I'm doing is I'm presenting you this long message here. This is going to, you know, it says that this is an 18-minute read. No, I assure you this is not going to take you 18 minutes to get through this. I'm pretty sure it's going to take you longer to get through. Me reading it will take me longer than 18 minutes. Okay, but whatever. You know, that's what this up here is. I posted it 9 hours ago, 18-minute read. No, it's not 18 minutes. I assure you of that. This essay here is something that I've been working on since day one, and I have a number of different iterations of this, and sometimes I've changed it significantly. I've kind of revamped the whole thing, and then I kind of have incremental changes, and one of those changes that I have to do is proofread for the typos and the spelling errors. Okay, so I'm still working through some of those as well. All right, you know. So this rather lengthy essay, I'm calling this the basic introduction. I have one that's more advanced, believe it or not. But this has been a work in progress for a while. I've needed to do this from the beginning. I've been working with this from the beginning of, you know, almost from the beginning. Like a few months into it, I realized I need to have a basic primer for how this works. And so from almost the beginning, I've been working on this kind of basic introduction essay of giving you the fairly complete basic rundown, you know, without what makes it, you know, advanced is you start going into facts and figures and the math and, you know, a lot more, another layer of abstracted knowledge. What I'm trying to do here is give pictures and practical understanding in this essay of how to kind of wrap your head around what's going on. And I'm giving a few different versions from a few different angles, but I need to explain technically how, from the you know, the engineering aspect of how you get the colors on the spectrogram, what they call the Schumann, right? It's the most fun, the most sexy of it all. It looks like a, you know, a tapestry, so it's the one that people latch onto. I can understand that, but how are you getting this picture of the atmosphere? Okay, that is the question. How are you getting this picture from what's happening in the atmosphere? In addition to, how do you read what it says on there? So this has been the basic motivating force, the basic drive to produce, like I said, this basic essay, introductory essay. Okay. And for the record, it's an expository writing. And I learned when I was at Mitchell, my first year of college, I took expository writing 101. So this would be one of the type of things that we would have to do. Explain how a, you know, a loudspeaker works in terms where, you know, you have a visual aid, but oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I've written papers, I've done. And in my engineering courses, I took engineering courses as well at college. This was my first year, community college, in New London. It was very well-known, you know, very well, a credentialed college, put it that way. And that was the engineering courses. That was one of the courses I had to take was engineering communications was the name of the, you know, basically the name of the class. You know, communicating in engineering speak of how do you, you know, how do you translate all this technical stuff into a way that, you know, a person who's not technical is able to understand it. So this has just been, you know, this is my technical experience um, in this that I have coming into this, and I'm trying to use the experience I have to present this to you. Rather complicated, right? It's a steep learning curve to figuring this stuff out. So I'm trying to give you a lot of the backgrounds to this that help you to figure out how to read this and interpret it. Instead of you having to depend on the wackadoos who explain this in dimensions and like third, fifth dimension, and this thing here is like nope, timeline shifts and all of this hocus pocus, hoodoo, goodoo, voodoo stuff that people come up with to explain hoodoo, guru, voodoo stuff that they try and interject either because they don't know or to mess you up. Like, I don't know, but let me explain to you technically how this works. So when people do come to you with a jimmy jive on the dimensions and, you know, third, fifth dimension or whatever, like, no, let me explain it to you how this is working. You know, first off, get all four charts, which is not there. All right. Let's go through this real quick. This is today's reading, by the way. All right. So we have all four charts. Okay, we have, this is the spectrogram, which is not the Schumann. Okay, and then this is amplitude directly underneath it. And then this is quality. Okay, and then this is frequency. So we need to have, in order to know what is happening on the Schumann, which is the spectrogram, you need to have, I've said this, the four panels, the three dependency panels, in addition to this guy right here. So that's really important. The first most important step of understanding the Schumann is understanding that it comes with three other panels in order to decrypt, or in order for you to translate the data into understanding. Okay. Okay. So I think where I'm at is I'm going to start. I have my notes over here. I'll just say this. You don't need to know this, but I was originally going to plan. I'm still trying to figure this out. We're here as I'm doing this. Read from my website as it is, or to bring up the visual aid and read from differently. And I think what I'm going to do is do this. All right. So this is, I'm not going to read from the my website. I'm going to have the visual aid. I'm going to change this. Hold on a sec. If I can. Can I change this? Hopefully. Okay, onward and upward. I think this will work. It seems like I had started this video yesterday. All right, so little me down the corner. Hi. All right, so I'm going to read from the script here. But we know that this is on the website here, not that. All right. So, all right, so having said that, still on the website. All right, so this is the 27th of June. How do I, oh, all right, so about 13 minutes is the end of the introduction. We're getting into the material, all right, 1346, actually. How do I read the Schumann resonance reports essays, introduction, observations, reading the reports? All right, so that's the title. The introduction. All right. So I think what I'm gonna do before I get it, but let me preface this with say, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna record this all in one shot, the best I can. Okay, all of this 18-minute read. I guarantee it's not 18 minutes. So, and then what I'm gonna do, I think, is kind of cut it up in Premiere, and cut it up in the Adobe program I use. And I'll kind of make shorts of this. I think that's the best. I've kind of been thinking about this for a while. So I'll have one long ass discussion on this. Maybe have it as a premiere or a live, but then cut it up into smaller bite-sized pieces. Because a lot of people don't have the time it takes to kind of sort through everything And for me, it can get a little confusing to kind of put the time codes on everything and whatever. So I think I'm just going to kind of chop this up. So that's the idea I have right now. Takes time to do this, so we'll have to see eventually how long it'll take me to chop this up if I do. But in the meantime, I'm going to just do all this one shot and then send it out as a live thing to do. All right, so that's the preface. Introduction. The purpose of this essay is to assist people who are interested in understanding the Schumann resonances as atmospheric phenomena from the technical aspect. Additional to the atmospherics, we are faced with the detecting hardware of the antenna complex. Attached to the hardware of the detector antenna itself, to the meters, the graphs, which they use to record these signals. All right, so I'm trying to give people the basic explanation of what the Schumann resonances are from the atmospheric phenomena into how it's measured and then how to read the measured graphs. All right, so that's the basic gist of what my job here is. Okay, just so you know that the technical aspect, the technical and engineering aspect of that is those three major points there. Eventually, a conditioned signal gets plotted to be analyzed on an RF spectrogram. So RF is radio frequency spectrogram, which is what you see here behind me or above me. 0.11. I don't even think I'll go through the numbers except occasionally. I did that for marking things as a discussion point. I don't think I'm going to go through the numbers here. The Schumann resonances, SR, is a set of spectrum peaks in the extremely low frequency ELF portion of Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum. Schumann resonances are extremely subtle, operating in the pico, P-I-C-O, range. Specialized detecting antenna equipment is necessary. Detector antenna complex needs to be placed in a remote location far away from human activity. The external power sources, such as the domestic power mains or even people's houses. Complex chain of processing is necessary to extract a valid signal from the atmosphere. And there is a lot more electromagnetic interference in the atmosphere than people understand. And it needs to get filtered out in order for you to understand the most subtle of these, which is the Schumann resonances. The extracted signal must be conditioned before it is properly recognized by the spectrum analyzer. There are multiple moving parts in this equation. The spectrogram is the last step in this process. The spectrogram is the analyzer. Schumann resonances are subtle energies of the atmosphere. Oftentimes, these delicate atmospheric electromagnetics are overpowered by the EM, electromagnetic fields, of your unshielded domestic electronics. That would include smart TVs now, the phones, wireless, all kinds of stuff. You cell signal in your house that bounces around, wireless, the Wi-Fi, the Alexa, the Siri, whatever you got. The Apple phones, Apple devices, all of that goes toward this discussion of the fields of unshielded domestic electronics which we surround ourselves with. Okay. Atmospheric electromagnetics is not automatically Schumann resonances. We are looking to explore Schumann resonances. However, it's now a common practice or occurrence to confuse Schumann resonances with any and all atmospheric electromagnetics, most of which is actually much stronger in power and intensity. On one of my streams, I did a demonstration of the electric field of the HP laptop that I use as my core of the system, and that was at 51 nanoteslas, which is 1,000 times, or actually, it was 2,000 times stronger than the strongest Schumann resonance signal. There is more that's local to us, so we need to evaluate these as possible sources of ringing or physiological maladies. Okay. And I have keywords here, which are, words that, a vocabulary that people should understand going into this. So the basic keywords and phrases at this point are amplitude, quality, dependency, decibel as a unit of measure, Tesla as a unit of measure, mode and modulation, bandwidth, frequency, velocity, resonance, harmonic, vector, okay, vector graphic. People are familiar in computers with vector graphic, but a vector is something that's scalable, okay, as opposed to a raster graphic, which is not. A vector is actually, technically, a vector is a meeting point of two forces. So, EMF, which is electromagnetic field, nano, which is a prefix, pico, the prefix, ionosphere, ionospheric layers. It's important to know the ionospheric layers. There's more of them than just one. And the phrase diurnal variation. Those are not in alphabetical order. Okay, in case you didn't know. All right, so 1.0.0. All right, so part one. Observations, the current conditions of the Schumann resonances as recorded on Tomsk's SOS graphs. Okay, so this right here is kind of the meat and potatoes of what I do. I give the current condition, the observations is one of those things that I kind of do regularly. I don't get to it every day of the week, but at least 4 or 5 times a week, I do my observations of what's happening on the Schumann as provided by Tomsk University. All right, so this the current conditions and the peaks, the daily peaks, are the two things that I do that change like every day on this. But pretty much all the rest of this changes as I kind of correct things and rearrange it. But the date itself, this right here, the observations, when I do that, it's the actual date itself that I'm looking at here. All right, so current conditions. Okay, meat and potatoes. The past 24 hours has been relatively calm. We had a day of flatlined amplitude, which stayed stuck to the floor of the chart. All right, so hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. Okay, I had to move it back to the one on my website because the latest and greatest, the newest one, is not showing you what I'm writing about here. Okay, so I just want you to know. And this one here is in a holding pattern. Okay, so there's part of this that I would need to talk about that's separate from this. All right, so just I'm going back to this here. Can I blow it up? Hold on. Nah, it's gonna be what it is. Okay, yep. Guy's gonna have to keep it this way. All right, so all right, so yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. So this right here, you see, it's a long period of flat line. It's over 24 hours of what I'm calling a flat line. The Ascensionists and the Humanists, when they use that term flatline, refer to a thing much differently than this here flat line that I talk about here. And there's a little bit of confusion and trickery in the language of them calling you flat, of them out there calling it a flat line because they want you to believe it's died. Just, that's what the Schumann happened. Oh, the Earth stopped. No, it didn't. Sorry. No, it didn't. All right. So anyway, here's a little flat line, good 24. It was like close to 32 hours, I think, or something. Starts here 16. What's the last one? That's 18, 19, 20. Right, so it's 18. And then you have that 17, 18 right there. 18, 19, 20. Yeah, so it's like 30 hours of it just calm. Amplitude calm. The quality itself has also been fairly calm. You look at that, there's just a smooth, not a lot of bumps, not a lot of ridges, not a lot of peaks, just smooth. White mode smooth, the red mode smooth, and then the yellow and green are kind of, mirroring each other. They're kind of acting in tandem. And again, when we're looking at these, we're looking at different heights of the atmosphere, of where it's bouncing off. It's really important to understand the height of quality depends, or the intensity, the peak to peak of the magnetics depend on how high the wave can bounce up into the atmosphere. amplitude moves like a flagpole, like bing, like that. Okay. Whereas I've given this analogy, like on the playground, you have the flagpole, and then you have the seesaw, the teeter-totter, with the flagpole as the fulcrum point. So the magnetics go out like that. Oh, are you kidding me? The magnetics go out in a wave, and the amplitude moves through the air in an upright. Okay, so that's important to understand this. So the 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 magnetics are a wave, and they're bouncing like like ocean, right? And so depending on the strength and the intensity of uh, the electric side of that wave is depends on how high it's bouncing. Okay, if it's mostly the settled in of the magnetics into the Schumann resonances component, it's staying stable laterally. Okay, so the higher in electrics is proportionately lower in magnetics, which is, again, it's a direction that we want to look at of the same intensity kind of falling down and dropping and reverting into equality or degrading the quality into magnetics. Okay, the amplitude, I've shared this before. The amplitude is like the purity of the signal, height, and then as it falls, as it travels around the world, it falls, it degrades into magnetics. And that's how you get the Schumann resonances, is the degradation into the quality of the signal. Okay. All right. So the quality here has been relatively smooth. There's a synchronous mode. You look at all of this synchronous mode. It's like the soldiers marching in a line. They're kind of nestled all in within each other, and that's what gives you this. That's how I know that it's coming from a higher, purer source up higher in the ionosphere, is the synchronization of this the electric mode. Okay, all uniform. Okay, um, and oftentimes you'll see an inverse reaction between the amplitude and the quality, that as you get an amplitude burst, the quality will drop. Okay, and so you see that there's this kind of burst here, and then it drops. Okay, a lot of these, there's not on this one here. Okay, this quality mode 1, you're getting some notable peaks there, but the rest of these have kind of all slamped off. Okay, and you're seeing a peak there, peak there, which coincides with this right here, which is not a very big peak. It's not very big, not very, but it's relatively big over here, down on the quality portion. Okay. So this is what I call synchronous mode of the amplitude, as opposed to it being linked up mode 1, A1 with Q1, and them acting in pair as it should be. Normally should be. When they figure these things out, they figure the electrics and the magnetics working together as a team. However, I call that requited. However, when you were getting a pure amplitude bursts, lightning, okay, these are lightning. You got to remember, this is lightning. It's not measuring solar radiance. That's 1,000 times stronger. That's the KP index. Okay, this is not, relative to theory, this is not the sun blasting us. Okay, what happens is the sun compacts the ionosphere, and then there's a channel that shortens, that allows electricity to move more smoothly and more efficiently from the upper to the lower ground, from upper atmosphere to the lower earth to the ground. Okay, so it's a big part of what this is the upper atmosphere grounding down into the earth. Okay, it's not of necessity solar radiance. The solar input tightens up the ionosphere, and that tightened drum head is what helps to resonate the Schumann resonances more efficiently. So that's what synchronous mode is. That is coming from a higher, literally an upper or higher source. Okay. The sudden increase in amplitude modes around 03 local time, synchronous mode activity between amplitude modes from 3 to 16 local time. That's what I'm talking about here, from 3 to 16. And as a note, 3 LT, 3 local time is 3 a.m. in the morning at Tomsk time. So this here, this is uh, basically midnight. That's 11, that's midnight. So 1, 2, so 11. Normally their day ends at 11. Okay, basically that's when the Schumann kind of goes to sleep. So you see, it would normally have gone to sleep there. However, okay, we get solar bursts, solar radiance. It's in the middle of the night there, 3, 4, 5, up until 5. Basically, it's their nighttime. 11 to 5, that's their nighttime relative to the Schumann resonances over there. So when there should be something when it should be sleeping at 3 in the morning, and we get a burst, you've got to remember that's not the sun. Okay, that's not the sun normally. However, if we do get solar activity in the upper atmosphere, that will shorten the channel that allows electricity to move through. All right. So whenever you think of the Schumann resonances, you've got to remember the ionosphere acts as a barrier to keep out the majority of solar radiances. And what happens is more solar radiance doesn't necessarily get through. It compacts the lower atmosphere. Okay. Now, there are huge solar bursts that can, really do a number and wipe out the magnetosphere, like the Carrington event did that. It just did a number on the ionosphere, and it really came down into the lower, compressed, but it compressed. You got to remember, it doesn't come as higher order sunlight. It's filtered through the ionosphere, and then it comes in as optical light. Starts out as X-rays and gammas and all that shit and plasma, but then it hits the ionosphere, and then it gets filtered, and then it starts compressing or forcing down into the lower atmospheres. And it goes from that, once it gets filtered through the ionosphere, it changes into light. It's like a fire, in a sense. The wood gets converted into heat, but also light and sound energy. You've got to remember that. So there's multiple kind of, as it kind of layers itself down through the density of the lower ionosphere, it starts interacting electrically with what's around us. And especially because during the Carrington, they talked about the telegraph wires catching on fire. Okay, and operators' equipment catching on fire. And that's part of what it is. When you get a significant blast that pushes the high voltage of the upper ionosphere down to us, the air is electrified. And that's what you have to remember. It's not the solar radiance, it's the upper atmosphere electromagnetics, the electricity in the upper atmosphere that gets compressed down to us and pushed down to us. So that's what you're largely feeling in all of this, that's causing, that may be causing the ringing in your ears if you're not properly grounded. All right. So, all right. So I read that. As previously stated, the Tomsk daytime ends at approximately 23 local time. The SOS, which is the Space Observing System detectors, registered a series of bumps, boop, 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 at a time when it should otherwise be calm. Nighttime is when the sun is not directly beating up the ionosphere into a taut state. And we talk about that like the drum head. The twin peaks, amplitude spikes, these twin peaks, and the amplitude spikes are there at 15 and 16, roughly 15, 16 local time. Under usual circumstances, frequency will dip when amplitude spikes. Okay, so there's an inverse relationship between the electrics and the speed, right? The distance, speed as in distance from peak to peak. All right, so the peak to peak drops as the amplitude comes in. The distance between peaks drops. Okay, lowers. The frequency dependency is, as a reminder, it's a measure of the wavelength peak to peak in kilometers. As amplitude, which is the electric side, as measured in decibels, spikes, the frequency measurement dips down. Normally, there is an inverse or proportional relationship between amplitude and quality, which is electric and magnetic components, which they factor this into it, by the way, when they're coming up with their equations for how the modes work. They factor into there the automatic factor that the electric and the magnetic component work together as a team. Okay? In the case of the Schumann resonances, where amplitude is coming down from the ionosphere directly, the modes of amplitude will reflect a unified signal, which I call synchronous mode activity. All right, so synchronous mode is where you get nearly identical or identical enough shapes on the four modes: amplitude 1, amplitude 2, amplitude 3, and amplitude 4. So you see how they're roughly all kind of, like a nested, I call them nested dolls, where they kind of fit neat into each other, and that's how you get the white tinged with rust, tinged with green, fringed rather, with rust and maroon and orange, and then finished with green because it just nests all in it. And this is the basically when they talk about the white, the white out or whatever, it's always surrounded and fringed by the maroon, rust, orange color, and then the greens. Okay, in the same shape. And that's what these are. You've got to look at the shape of the wave, like all of them together. It's all, there's a spectrum of, A, B, C, and D that you have to consider as a group. Please. um, you know what? Take a smoke break right now. Take a coffee break. I gotta find myself. I gotta take a little coffee break here myself. Okay, we're back. All right, 37 minutes into it, and I haven't gotten out of the introduction yet. Actually, no, I'm into part one. I'm into the how this works. All right, so there's a proportional relationship between the electrics and the magnetics. Amplitude is coming down from the ionosphere directly. The modes of amplitude, these four on here, 1, 2, 3, 4, will reflect a unified signal because it's a pure signal. I don't know how to explain it better than that, but it's a pure, intact electric side signal. I'm not sure how I can explain this better. Which I call a synchronous mode. Synchronous mode between the four colors is a relatively pure signal or one of high quality. Okay. As the amplitude signal comes down from the ionosphere, propagating through the atmosphere, the purity of the signal is degrading in quality, is degrading from quality into magnetics. Below is reported the so-called daily peaks. Okay, and I get into this here. This term may be misleading. Okay. Oh, I added this today. All right. So so the daily peaks is a relative phrase, and I'm my baseline for what I'm considering a peak is going from the amplitude spikes. Okay. So at the time, I base this off of the time of the amplitude spikes, and in this case, it's 15 and 16 local time. They both hit 78 on the decibel scale. Okay, this is decibel is a pico electron volts. Okay, this is not a frequency measurement here. This is not 78 hertz. None of these are actually measured in hertz except this here. This is the measurement of hertz. But the frequency here is a measurement in kilometers, just so you know. So the 78. So I'm going, these two peaks, roughly they hit both the same, basically the same 78 as far as I could see, 78 decibels. So those are my peaks. So based on those, I'm reporting what's happening on the quality. So you have a relative time frame and narrow down the time frame of when the activity was on the chart. All right. So in some cases, the quality dips and it drops. And in some cases, the frequency drops. So it's not, so using the phrase a peak, when I say daily peak or a spike, it's misleading because they're not all peaking and they're not all spiking. Okay. So I need a relative baseline that I can kind of, square everything into. So that's what the spikes are, is that when I'm saying it's a spike, it may not be a spike, and that's what it is listed here when I put a dip. If you go, when you read it, yourself, you'll see, that's what that means. It says it's not a spike, it's a dip. It dropped. Okay. All right. So the point. So I don't want to go over all these numbers again. They're in they're in the website. You can read them again. I went through once, a pain in the ass, but basically, as I've said before, this chart right here, okay, equals this right here. The high point of these right here, 78, 78, this is still 40 hertz, but the hertz is a frequency which is a peak-to-peak measurement. Okay, and this is measuring the harmonics and not the raw data of the wavelength itself. Okay, so that's what this is telling you. That's with 40 here. It's lining up, happens to line up to the top of this. It's not 40. So this number is 78. That's what that height was at 78. It goes from 4, the low point here, 4, to the high point here, 78. Okay, so that's what that is indicating to you. That's what that's showing you, is the high point, and it fluctuates from moment to moment. This kind of fluctuates based on the parameters of the spectrogram itself. This is difficult for people to understand. It's difficult for me to kind of explain this in a way that it's simple for you to understand. If I say it's scaled into the spectrogram signal, I don't know if you could understand that, but that's basically what they've done. What they've done is the peak of this at this moment when they took this reading, this peak here was 78. Okay. See this peak here? That peak topped the chart at 50. Okay. See this height is 50? This height is 78. Okay. It's important for you to understand this little tiny detail of how they scale it in there to fit the available space. They don't have an absolute measurement of the spectrogram where its height is at the top and it compresses and moves up. They only have the space that's available in the hardware to work with. So they scale this proportionate. That's why these numbers change every single day. These numbers change. It baffled me for the longest time. But that's why they change, is because it's giving you the height at this time. Okay? Not that long ago, the number up here, this was up at the top at 50. Okay, it reached the top at 50 when this wasn't here. Okay, later on, as this shows up down the road, this peak here is no longer the high peak. It's scaled down. So that is why this is at the top of the chart here, but it's not here. These numbers fluctuate because they're giving you a relative set of numbers or relative set of values based on the available space of the machine itself. You can't physically resize the machine to keep these numbers absolutely pristine. That's why these numbers keep changing from day to day to day to day. And this high point, when this was here 2 days ago, the peak, see, this is a peak, but it's not a peak anymore. Well, at that time, the peak was 50, and there wasn't a gap there. Now, you see, there's no gap here to the top of that and the top of that, because this is now the top point. That's now the height of the signal. All right. So I just want to say that you can read, I've given you the numbers already in there. I'm not going to read them again. I explained to you what the dip is, the peak, what that relatively means. All right. Okay. 1.1.3 spectrogram. Amplitude spikes come from lightning discharge, which travel in an upright fashion, flagpole, like I said, as reflected in the spectrogram. All right, so the orientation of these verticals is because the orientation of amplitude, it comes in that way, like a flagpole. All right, and so that's what gets reflected on the Schumann resonances. Okay, as this upright is the amplitude. The horizontal is the quality. Okay, quality is the magnetics which radiate outward, like again, like the seesaw analogy. When they move up and down, it's like a wave that goes up and down. Okay, and it's constrained by a balance. Okay, that's a really good way to put that. The quality magnetics, it moves horizontally as reflected in the spectrogram. Green mode 4 is the level of wavelength frequencies which are closest in response to the actual planet itself. The other modes, 1, 2, 3, measure reflectivity. I gotta change that word. Measure reflectivity of the higher layers of the atmosphere, the ionosphere. Things to consider relative to amplitude spikes, 1.1.4, things to consider relative to amplitude spikes and the Schumann resonance harmonics. Okay, so these are a few background things to remember. Multiple waves interfering. The measurement of Schumann resonance frequency is not that of the wave frequency. I've said that before. The frequency that you see here in this, okay, this F is a measure of kilometers from peak to peak. This is how they measure radio waves. The standard of radio waves is peak to peak distance, whether it's the centimeter band, the millimeter band, the kilometer band. Radio waves, which the Schumann resonances are, radio waves are always measured peak to peak in a certain band of frequency. That is the frequency of a wavelength. Okay? Radio wavelength. There's frequency modulation and amplitude modulation, FM and AM. When we're talking about, there's other forms of radio and how they fiddle with it. Okay, but when we're talking about the standard terrestrial radio, we think of amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. Amplitude is the height, frequency is the peak to peak. Multiple waves interfering with themselves create standing waves. These hold steady at a resonant frequency, which is the difference between these two primary fundamental waves. Harmonics are caused from two or more waves being out of synchronization, which interfere with each other to create a resonance or a harmonic frequency. This resonant harmonic stays consistent over the course of time due to certain constraints of constants, which is the size and shape of the Earth, of the ionosphere, the speed of light, radio frequency. All right, so there's a bunch of constraints that keep the Schumann resonances constant and keep them stable over the course of time. Amplitude spikes, 1.1.5. Amplitude spikes are not resonances, nor are they harmonics, nor are they measured in hertz, which is cycles per second. Amplitude spikes are not measured in hertz. Amplitude, which is the electric component, comes top down from the ionosphere at around 200, they measure between 200 to 250,000 volts to the earth ground. Amplitude is top down, meaning it does not rise to a frequency. Amplitude does not reach up to a frequency or a decibel rating, even, I will say. Amplitude lowers down to a reported decibel power rating, which is, in our case, pico electron volt decibels of amplitude. Amplitude spikes are not resonances, nor are these harmonic frequencies. Amplitude spikes are jolts of electricity which come top down from a much higher voltage than that which is reported by the antenna detector complex. Meaning, it starts out as a higher voltage, but by the time it gets to the antenna, it's a certain measured voltage that we see as reported. Okay, all right, take a breath. 50 minutes into it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate everyone for being here. Much love. Thank you all. You can, even if this is running as a premiere and a live, you can still pause it. Okay, so now's a good time to pause, take a break. I'm going to take a sip of my soda. Be back in a second. Thank you. On that note, I have to say that really is actually one of the great things about doing a YouTube, either a premiere or, uh, you know, the live stream, is that you actually can pause it. Like it's a movie, even though it's running live, you still can pause it, and then you can kind of catch up with it later, and you can, all the chat is still there. Anyway, all right. So, onward and upward. 1.2. Some words on frequency. All right. So this is a few different types of frequency I discussed because it was kind of maddening to kind of talk to people about this word frequency, which is very poorly understood. I wanted to have a little section in here that dealt with this phrase frequency. All right. So, some words on frequency. This word is a term with broad, often confusing usage. For our purposes, I will define this term in a few ways. Frequency, technically speaking, is used to designate peak events over time. Peak to peak, wave crest to wave crest. This is also cycles per second, such as a wave propagating along a horizontal fashion. Okay, so the guy's name was Hertz, like Ferdinand Hertz, Hertz. And Hertz only refers to cycle per second, okay? Frequency is technically, it is a cycle per second, okay? Amplitude, as we've discussed, amplitude is not a frequency, okay? Amplitude is a vertical height or a vertical frequency. It is an intensity measured in decibels of electron volts. Spikes relative to the spectrogram are scaled vectors based upon the limitations of the scope itself, which I just went over. Velocity is a speed, which is a straight line vector traveling over time. So amplitude is more of a vector, more of a, amplitude is more of a velocity and not a frequency. Resonant frequency is the difference between two fundamental or originating waves, which we will call wave fronts. These fundamentals run into each other repeatedly. This causes interference patterns called standing waves. Standing waves are quasi-stationary. They oscillate in place in the atmosphere. 1.2.5. Harmonics are a series of resonances which are splitting off from the original primary resonances into a harmonic set of evenly spaced resonant frequency variants. In this case, it's differential frequency with a separation between the resonances of 6.6 hertz. Again, this is a differential in series. Okay. Frequency as given in the standard measurement of radio waves is a distance in kilometers over time. The number values given in the dependence from Tomsk is a measurement of kilometers. This is not the resonant frequency. Okay? 2.7. Frequency of the electric scale of a person is separated by 10 hertz. So your different chakras all are separated by 10 hertz. Each of your primary energy center portals, the chakras, operates in 10 hertz differentials. So you, across your core, have different frequency ranges, different harmonics to you based on your organs and where they kind of fall in the processing of your energy. That's the electric scale of a person. Okay, you as an electric being, you have these different frequency kind of ranges in you that you deal with. There's frequency as in periodicity of the heart rate function, synchronization of the body centers with states of brain activity called coherence, which is not a disparate frequency. It's combining two frequencies into coherence. That's what it's a little different from a resonance, but it's along that line. Then there's sympathetic vibrations. That is the best way of looking at this phenomena. Essentially, it's where one bass resonance was moved to meet another stronger bass resonance. Okay, that's what I have written. Okay, this is a good pausing point. I just took a break to get something to eat, and this is the 18-minute read that this was supposed to be has come and gone like a flame in the wind. You know, let's just I like kind of taking this easy and kind of working through stuff. I just went through a lot of really technical stuff. It's time for deep breathing exercises or something. Um, so you know, I'm getting coffee, I'm getting some stuff, checking messages. So why don't you feel free to do that? I'm going to pause this, and then I'm going to be back in a few minutes, and you know. I think what I'm going to do too is that there is a section between the part one here. This is just the kind of introductory part. Like I've covered a lot of advanced shit for most people, and this is just the basic. You know, this is just this is just a lot of videos. I've talked about some of the basic stuff, but if you're new here, this is not basic, not for you. This is way advanced, and I recognize that. So, there's a part, and so that's why I'm kind of pausing here, kind of like we're gonna just kind of debrief, I think. There's the next section in this that I have in the writing. I'm gonna leave this just for the website. It's basically the next section I have, 1.3, is myths of the Schumann resonances. And this is I'm going to leave that part, just like I said, for the I think I want to do a video of just that. I'm almost an hour into this, and this has taken a little bit longer than even my rambling style has taken a lot longer than I had anticipated. So I'm going to, for the purposes of condensing this down to a reasonable time, I'm going to leave out the next section that I chronologically have on the website, called the myths of the Schumann resonances. And I think what I'm going to do is do a video on just that, and I'm going to probably post that just that by itself. It's bookmarked here where that would go in this narrative. But I think just for the purposes of this video, it's not integral to the material. Although I do want to put, I think right here, 1.6. I am going to start at Gaia's heartbeat. I think that might be, it's kind of a myth, but I think that's one of those, that's the end of this part here, and the end of the part one. And then I'm going to move on to the next, is part two. After this couple paragraphs is part two. I think before I start on part two, I'm going to play a little music. It'll give me a chance to maybe cook a little bit, and I'll try and find a good couple songs that I can talk in the middle of this. So all right. So with that stated, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee, and we'll take a break, and we'll meet again in a few minutes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're back. All right. Thank y'all for being here. Now, if you've stuck with me this long, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So, like I said, at the tail end of the myths of the Schumann resonances, this part here, I'm phrasing this guy's heartbeat. Okay. The Tomsk's Schumann spectrogram is not reading Gaia's heartbeat of 7.8 hertz. The spectrogram is an analyzer of an electric signal which is captured from the antenna complex. Okay, so the antenna detectors pick up the signal. The antenna picks up the signal, processes it, and then sends it eventually. The last part of it is the analyzer, which is the spectrogram, which is what people call the Schumann. There is another circuit entirely that conducts power through the planet herself. This is the lower DC circuit of the telluric grid of the geoelectric circuit of the planet herself. Earth has electric currents that run through the rocks and convey through the rocks and the water, and all of that laterally, horizontally, basically through the surface first, and then through the underneath currents. Well, all right, it doesn't start at the surface first, right? But from where we're measuring it. All right, let's put it that way. So going down through like those, there's an interchange. I'll put it this way. There's an interchange. There's Birkeland currents that happen, and there's various currents that happen that are connecting the lower and the upper atmosphere that are of a different electric circuit. Those are the telluric currents that are stronger in strength than the Schumann resonances. The Schumann resonances are not to be confused with the telluric currents of the power itself. Schumann resonances are, as Professor Schumann described them, the ringing of the bell. That's why I love that analogy of the ringing of the bell, so you can know the difference between the hitting of the bell and when it rings. Okay. The heartbeat of the planet resides within the chest of the planet herself. The Schumann spectrogram is specialized equipment with a very limited range of applicability of what it receives and what it picks up and what it interprets as a valid signal. There is a huge misunderstanding on the matter of what is being displayed on the spectrogram. The spectrogram is not a seismic meter, although Cumiania does have seismic meters. The spectrogram is not a seismic meter. It is not an optical light sensor. It's not telling you a white light, gamma light is coming in. It's not measuring the telluric currents, the Birkeland currents, or any of that. Nor is it recognizing UV series light. It's not telling you UV is coming in. That's not what it's doing. Nor does the spectrogram detect gamma bursts, nor does it detect X-ray bursts. Okay, the Schumann resonances are not detecting, the Schumann resonances are not those, first off, and that is not what the antenna is picking up. Schumann resonances are the product of lightning discharges, again, the ringing of the bell, between the upper and the lower DC circuits, which continue to propagate as magnetic waves, which circle the globe, eventually oscillating in place to create the atmospheric resonances, the Schumann series of resonances, which are more of a form of gravity, as I've said. Information outside of the preset signal range gets filtered out as noise. So that's one of the things to remember about this, is the filtering. It's really important that they got to filter out a lot of the extraneous influences as noise. Local influences can impart a false signal on sensitive detectors. Okay, over at Cumiania, I've taken you over there to the website, and they publicly said on their website, be careful of what you're looking at when you're seeing the graphs, because it is subject to local industrial interference from local industry. I think of like 5 kilometers away or some shit. Local interferences can impart a false signal on sensitive detectors. Active filtering, or multiple filtering stages, is used to avoid a false local signal imparted upon the plotted images. The heartbeat of the planet rests within the chest of the planet herself. This circuit is embedded within the planet herself, and it does not leach out or kind of vibrate out into the atmosphere as people believe it does. Earth's planetary electric grid is a much more powerful circuit than the Schumann resonances themselves. Current is the magnetic side of the EMF signal, and current travels electrically as a direction, such as north and south or east and west, and it's generally north to south. That's because that's the magnetic poles in the nano Tesla range. Okay. All right. 1 hour, 4 minutes. Part 1 is done. Part 0 and part 1 is done. All right, so we got part 2 left. All right, so what I'm going to do as a reward for those of you who are still around, I'm going to find some music. I'm going to play a few minutes of music, so we legitimately, if this is running live, we actually can have like a cigarette break or whatever. So let me find some good music here, and hopefully I'm not going to shut this down. All right. Okay, I think I found some good music. All right. This is 10/9/2020, I think, September 10th, I guess. Or I guess October 9th. That's right. The month, day, the year. We do it screwy here. All right. So yeah, so on that cheery note, without much more blathering about me, I'm gonna play a few Aronmixes here. And I'll meet you on the other side whenever. So on that cheery note. Okay, that was a really good Aronmix, and I do not really want to turn it down, except it's, well, I ran the half an hour and it's time for class again. All right, so on that cheery note, thank y'all for being here. Let me pause this. All right, and I think I'll play more of that on the outro. Oh, let me find myself. Here I am. Hello, little me. All right. Pause you. Okay. We have all right, so an hour and a half into it, we're now getting to the main meat and potatoes of the section here of how to actually read the Schumann resonance reports. All right, so this is part 2 we're going to get into. Oh good God, this as well is also not an 18-minute read. And I think, let me put it this way, if it was just a matter of reading through it and you didn't have to understand it, you could probably get through the words in relatively 18 minutes, short, small time. However, big part of this, you want to understand it. And so to understand the writing is not just to read it through. You have to read it through a few times. And I have people who assure me, you fabulous 10 of you, assure me that you go back and do reread and do go and replay the videos and stuff, and pause them and kind of, go over the material slowly. And I'm grateful for that. Thank you. You're helping up my video views. So thank you very much. But on a real level, you really do need to. And, the truth is, I didn't get this smart, this knowing as much as whatever I know, through one time and one time only. No, I mean, there's a lot of trial and error here, but there's a lot of reading, and you have to go and read, and then you match it up with experimentation, and then you can start getting, the practical wisdom of it. Wisdom is not book knowledge. Wisdom is earned experience through trial and error. So that's what I'm bringing into this is, a long history of practical hands-on experience working with, electricity and electromagnetics and not electrocuting myself. All right, so on that cheery note, let's get into the material here. Part 2, this is how to read the Schumann resonance reports from Tomsk. And that's technically Tomsk State University Space Observing System, SOS, in clear, concise terms. Okay. All right, so my visual aid here. All right. Okay, part 1, collecting and processing data, or 2.1, sorry. Collecting and processing data, the antenna complex. Okay, on the subject of the receiving antennas for the data, we need to understand a few basic concepts of how the signals are measured. Atmospheric electromagnetics propagate or move through the atmosphere as follows. Amplitude, the electric portion of the signal, propagates vertically as a theoretical column, or as I have described it, as a flagpole. As a visual aid, I'd like to explain as a flagpole from top down into the ground to be discharged in Earth's circuit. A dipole antenna, what they call the Marconi type, is generally used for this portion. There's other types of configurations of antenna, but it's basically dipole is it's an basically it's an electrical wire. That's basically that simple, but it's in a loop. Goes up, out, ties off, back the other way, ties off, goes back to point A halfway, and then you have it's like a T shape. It's commonly used for this portion. The quality, the magnetics are much different. Those are much more difficult to detect. Quality, the magnetic side of the signal, propagates horizontally or laterally in a manner which is described as hugging the ground. As a visual aid, I like to give the analogy of a seesaw or a teeter-totter on a playground. The theoretical fulcrum is the flagpole. that which is grounded into the ground. It's actually ground into the ground. Okay. A pair of induction coils is used for detecting the horizontal components or the magnetic components. And I wrote this correctly. Oh, yeah, okay, all right, yeah. All right, so the signal, 2.2, the signal, amplitude and electrics, an atmospheric electromagnetic impulse that reaches the antenna hardware, which is the actual wire itself, which is sufficient enough, if the signal is sufficient enough to overcome the impedance of the wire itself, this will generate a signal. This initiates electron movement along the wire. All right, so when the electromagnetics of the atmosphere actually make contact with the wire itself, this generates a signal if it is above the impedance of the wire itself and the impedance of the system, the ability of the wire and the system to take in more electrons, basically more electron movement. The electrons propagate along the wire, and this is what gets processed. So that signal gets processed through the amplification chain. An amplified processed signal, processed is it's amplified, it's filtered, it gets conditioned, then it's fed. And conditioned means it's got to meet the right voltage of the internal line of the spectrogram itself. This action of electron propagation along the wire, just talked about, ultimately produces a report, produces a movement, and that's what you get here. These line graphs are the report of the dependency. So dependency, this is the dependency of the electric side, the dipole antenna, and this is the dependency of the induction coil or the magnetic side. There's a dipole antenna, like I said, measures the amplitude of the electrics. This is reading in decibels of pico electron volts. The actual strength of the signal itself is not powerful enough to feed into the spectrogram. You got to remember that, due to the constraint of the line level input strength of the signal. Okay, so there's a differential between what comes in through the antenna and what the spectrogram as a component can read. So it has to be, the signal gets amplified, filtered, and conditioned so that it meets the the requirements of the spectrogram to be able to analyze something there. All right, 2.2.2, which this just happened to be random chance that I got these numbers, but I like 2.2.2 for quality magnetics. The induction coils serve, and I have shown elsewhere the induction coils. Maybe let me see if I can find an induction coil to show you. Okay, so here is an example of our induction coil, two induction coils, and how they have them. This is the Kumiania page, for those of you who know and are familiar, and I talk about the hen, the rooster that's there guarding the guard rooster, guarding the infamous Schumann resonance induction antennas. Anyway, so these are basically, if you saw those out in the field, you wouldn't know what they were, and you might very well, pick them up and think they're garbage or something. I don't know. But that's basically the induction coils are inside of these protective tubes. Sometimes it's a square enclosure, sometimes PVC. This is actually schedule 40 that they're using for this, with the caps on the end of it. You plug into it. Very clever. And then the wire is here. Okay, so this is the induction coil. See, induction coil. And then up here, scroll up, induction coil. This is the Marconi type antenna. This is the electric side of that. While I'm here, this is also spectrogram. All right, so but this is one that's also showing you a seismic meter as well. This is Kumiania. So having seen, I want to just throw that out. I don't want to go too far into, and this is earthquake activity, by the way. This is not Schumann resonances. These big red blotches here, these are not Schumann resonances. These are earthquakes, and they are having earthquakes because the solar wind, solar stuff. So that's our induction coil. Okay, so as I stated, induction coils are usually wrapped in a protective enclosure, plexiglass, or other plastic like the Schedule 4 that's PVC. Generally, these are placed close to the ground, perhaps you can see on a cinder block, 6 inches, approximately 6 inches off the ground. You don't want it on the ground itself. It's going to pick up the magnetic, the earth itself, and it's not what you're looking for. If you put it on the ground or in the ground, it'll pick up seismic waves. It'll not give you a correct signal. So it has to actually be up in the air just a little bit, not too high in the air, but not too close to the ground. The heart of the Schumann resonance detecting antenna is an induction coil. This is a copper wire wrapped around a magnetically permeable material, the most common of which is Mu metal, Mumetal. The coil senses an EMF signal which is within the range of receptivity. Okay, so you have to remember that depending on the type of signal you're looking to get, you have certain gauge of wire, certain thickness of wire. There's various types of wires, thickness and the composition of the wire itself, the cross section of the wire, depending on whether it's enameled on the outside, whether it's got a protective coat on the outside, all these kind of things. What's the insulating value of the protective coating on the wire? All right, so all of these factors go in to figure out which particular wire is used on the induction coil. First on the electric side, which is much easier, but then specifically on the induction coil, because when they figure out the frequency and the wavelengths and all of that stuff that they're looking for the induction coils to measure, there's a mathematical formula between how many turns, how thick the wire itself is, how thick the cross section of the windings are, and how big the core of the mu metal material, the conductive core, how big that is. There's a number of factors, and all of these factors go into making the size and the type, shape signals that you want to pick up through the induction coil. All right, there's a lot of people don't realize how much math is involved in getting the right size and shape coils. By shape I mean the diameter of the core of the antenna. Okay, the coil senses an EMF signal which is within range of receptivity, depending on a lot of variables. The winding material itself, which is oxygen-free copper, has an internal impedance. This impedance will otherwise prevent a signal from being detected if the signal is not amplified. So what winds up happening is, because of the antenna, because of the atmosphere, you wind up picking extraneous noise out from the environment, but the signal that you want is not strong enough to overcome that. So they have to figure out what the baseline of that is and filter out the baseline of all the extraneous stuff, which is more powerful, to get the much more subtle Schumann resonances detection that they're looking for. For finer signals like the Schumann resonances, they're very subtle in strength. Like the Schumann resonances, finer diameters of wire are required. Incoming signals need to overcome the natural reluctance or impedance of the wire in order for a signal to be generated along the length of the detector coil. There's a complex mathematical figuring between the cross section of the wire itself and the impedance of that wire itself not being able to take in anything more. There's a balance between that and between needing, right? You need a thinner, finer wire for a weaker signal. However, the Schumann resonances themselves are large wavelengths. They're kilometers, they're hundreds of kilometers. Because of what we're talking about here, like they start at 0.3 hertz and go to 45, 46 hertz. These are the lowest of the low frequencies, and as such, it would need a bigger, larger antenna to pick up the bigger, larger waves. However, there's a trade-off because the Schumann resonances are so subtle, and a big wire, big thick wire, as would be required for the lower frequencies, doesn't have the ability to move those electrons freely. Okay, so there's a trade-off. There's a balance between the cross section of the wire itself to pick up the low frequency signals, and the fact that it needs to be thinner, finer wire because the signal itself is a thinner, finer signal. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense to you, please leave me in the comments. Feedback. I like feedback. Comments. If it makes sense, please say, thank you, this makes sense to me. If it doesn't make sense, say this doesn't make sense, and where I have lost you. Okay? So either way, please leave comments. I appreciate hearing it. I need to hear from you guys whether or not this is making sense. All right. Next section, 2.2.3. What is signal conditioning? Okay. And this, when I talk about conditioning, what does that mean? From the antenna detecting hardware, a line signal is fairly weak. So the antennas pick up, it's a very subtle signal, they pick up in the pico range, but that's not strong enough for the spectrogram. So it needs to get amplified to a usable voltage. From the line, the filtering chain is used to remove unwanted noise from the system. Such noise may be a 50 hertz peak in the surrounding environment from the domestic power mains. So Kumiania, they show that black line at 50 hertz. That's the local power. A direct signal is not possible to be fed directly into the spectrogram. There is a line level impedance issue in the first place between the line, what's coming in, and what the spectrogram needs to see. There's a line level impedance issue that needs to get rectified. That's why when we talk about rectification, we're talking about either bridging two different types of signals from AC to DC, or we're talking about rectifying a voltage gap differential between the two. So something has to get added to, or something gets, somehow conditioned so that the two can meet each other and one's not blowing each other out. One signal is not blowing the component up, or that it's too weak for the component, the analyzer, to be able to use a viable signal. It means it's got to be at the right level for the spectrum analyzer, the spectrogram, to work. The line level impedance needs to be rectified. The input micro voltage coming from the antenna hardware is not up to usable line level strength, so an amplifier needs to increase the signal strength fed into the spectrogram. There is also a point of data storage on the hard drive, which requires a CPU processing algorithm to track and maintain the data alongside the dependencies being detected. And in some cases, corrupt data does get kicked out of the system. That's part of what happens, is keeping it within the constraints of the machinery, is that the AI says this is out of range, and it dumps it. That can happen. And there's not a person that sits there and says, oh, I don't like this. If it's just outside of the range for whatever reason, the pre-selected range, if it's outside of that, the data can be just declared null and void. It's noise in the system. And the Schumann resonances are very subtle, and they're trying to filter out what is noise from what is the actual Schumann resonances themselves. This is an art and a science, and it's very difficult. Okay, plotting the spectrogram. The information plotted on the spectrogram is the dependency, a couple things. It's the dependency of the dipole antenna and the dependency of, usually two, induction coils, one for north-south, the other east-west. The dependency of the frequency, which is the distance peak to peak in kilometers. Each of these dependencies has 4 potential colors that might appear on the spectrogram based on the mode or the slope, which is what we're calling the shape which is detected by the hardware itself. So when I say the hardware itself, I mean either the induction coil or the Marconi antenna, one of those, either or. That is the hardware itself, the actual physical wire of the hardware itself. The spectrogram is plotting a three-dimensional spherical signal on a planar surface based on the information received from the reporting dependencies. So the hardware itself, the wire, the induction coil or the Marconi type, that sends out a signal. So based on which part of the line it's coming from, the spectrogram will give you a visual representation of the direction that the signal is coming from, whether it's the upright vertical or it's a horizontal, either or. The spectrogram is representing to you the types of information coming from the antenna. One is the vertical axis, the other is the horizontal axis. And the color depth of the field of depth of the color is what gives you that extra third dimension of, near or far, if that makes sense to you. The signal data reporting by dependencies is the mode color information. The mode color information is what gets fed into the spectrographic plotter, therefore creating the interesting set of patterns found on the finished plotter. All right, finished plotting. All right, so the four colors of the modes are white, yellow, red, and green. Mode 1, Mode 2, Mode 3, Mode 4. And this is based on what I just said there. The modes are based on the size and the slope of the wave itself. How quickly it comes in, how it crests, and how it leaves. Okay? If it's coming in crest, bing, and then leaving immediately, that's like white mode. But if it's generally a more slumped curve, that's considered mode 4. Okay? So each mode has a size and shape, a configuration, a slope, what we're calling the shape of the wave, shape of the angle, the slope of the wave, depending on how it comes in, how it's being read by the machinery, interpreted by the machinery. It is then put somewhere on here as a color. Okay, here, somewhere as a color. Okay, it's got to go through the dependency stage first of actually being read as data. And then after that, after it gets processed, it goes into the spectrogram to be visually represented in full color. Okay, and this is how I understand the process. Extremely important. This is extremely important to remember. The spectrogram is not plugged directly into the atmosphere, nor is it a meter reading, nor is it a sensor. It's not a detector. It's not the antenna itself. Spectrogram is not reporting actual raw data, as many people feel it does. They have not plugged the spectrogram directly into the environment, into the atmosphere, to get a reading, like it's a mood ring. Spectrogram is not a mood ring. It is not modern art. The spectrogram is not reporting on the actual data itself. It's not receiving it. It's not detecting it. The induction coil, which I just showed you, the Marconi type, which I just showed you, those are picking up the data itself. The spectrogram plots its images based on the conditioned data coming from the hardware itself. So after it's been amplified and filtered, okay, then it gets sent to the spectrogram. Line graphs depend on the processing of the conditioned raw data, which is dependency. The spectrogram is a useful tool for visualization, yet it is important to remember that this image is a composite view, providing a convenient three-dimensional image. The plotted images of the spectrogram are scaled in resolution to fit the constraints of the actual scope screen, which I've said before. The peak here, you have this peak here of 78 because at this moment, that's the high point of the chart. Whereas this right here is already passed. At that time, 50, I think it was like 51 or something, was the high point of the chart, and that was at the top, right? So it gets scaled in depending on the day and the time. Yes, it does move, it does shift, depending on the constraints of the machine. And sometimes the high signal from yesterday is not the high signal from today. It's that simple. Okay. So the Schumann resonance this is right here, the spectrogram, 2.5.0. Spectrogram analyzes data. Analyze means to evaluate, or in our case, we break up and dispense the incoming signal of the electromagnetic signal of the dependencies. And spectrograms measure different things depending on what's put into them. Some measure sound, okay, the full range of sound from 20 to 20,000. Or some measure optical light or whatever, but that's not what this is. Ours is a radio frequency spectrogram that's measuring the information that's put in it. Spectrograms look differently depending on the parameters that are plugged into them. So depending on what you're measuring, spectrograms have a different look, but they all have a similar kind of tenor to the fact that it's breaking down a set of signals into the component, the spectrogram, the spectrographic image. It's a component of the entire range of the signals. I don't know an easy way to put that. This is not an easy thing. All right. Okay. All right, so some information I found. This was from Wikipedia. Quote, a spectrogram is a visual representation of the spectrum of frequencies of a signal as it varies with time. Okay, so you see the bottom of this is time. So as the frequencies go up and down across time, that's what this is showing you, essentially. But this is the radio frequencies. This is a certain set of radio frequencies from 0.03 to 46. That's all it's measuring. When applied to an audio signal, which it's not, but we use analogies of audio here because it's important. People understand audio. You can hear it better than the radio waves, which are invisible. You can't see them, you can't hear them, you can only kind of feel them. So that's why we like using, analogies of audio because they're easier to wrap your head around. When applied to an audio signal, spectrograms are sometimes called sonographs, voice prints, or voicegrams. When the data are represented in a 3D plot, they may be called waterfalls. So this isn't, but it's giving you an example of a different type of spectrogram of how it's measured and what it is. This may be kind of considering a waterfall, I'm not sure. But it's a radio frequency spectrogram anyway. This is not measuring audio, for the record. The spectrogram does not collect, nor measure, nor detect any information. The antenna hardware, the wire, does the actual detecting in the physical environment. The antenna wire collects or detects the actual environmental data, converting it into an electrical signal processed through the amplification and filtering chain. These environmental signals become processed through the amp and filter chain. The amplification and filtering create a conditioned signal, which eventually becomes intelligible to the spectrogram. Conceptually speaking, the spectrogram is like a printer, which breaks up a spectrum of light into constituent elements based on dimensional slope models, the slope, the shape, which are preset into the processing algorithm. So when the AI brain, which is not very smart, gets a signal, it detects the rise, peak, and then fall of it. And so based on that information, it puts it into it categorizes it into a mode. At what point, and you got to remember, it sounds like there's different signals here. There's one signal, and there's different parts to it. There's the first part, the middle, and then the last part of it. The first part of that signal is the white mode, then it goes into the yellow, and then the red and the green, relative to their coloring, the arbitrary coloring here at Tomsk. So this is ends of the same signal. They're not different signals here. It's the first end of it, and as it goes through the atmosphere, it starts converting into quality, and then as it degrades into quality, and then as it goes around the world, it's just continuing to degrade into quality, and then it eventually meets up with itself. The first part meets up with the last part, continues to do this, then it runs over itself, and that's what gives you the resonances. Okay, so the spectrogram is not detecting any of that. The spectrogram is just analyzing what part of the wave is coming in or at what time. It's fairly simple to understand that much. At no point is a spectrogram detecting nor collecting data. This bit of machinery only analyzes data from an external processing source. Okay. So that means that the spectrogram isn't necessarily processing the data itself, but it is analyzing the signal that comes to it. Okay? It's not processing the signal before it gets there. It receives the signal and then it processes what gets to it. The common misunderstanding of the Schumannists is the belief the spectrogram receives actual data from the atmosphere. The Schumannist, there's a school, I won't mention names here. There's a school of thought that people seem to have, from what I've gathered in their head, that the spectrogram gets plugged directly into the atmosphere, and they're channeling data through the atmosphere. That's what the Schumann does, is it channels data through the atmosphere. It doesn't, like it's reading the atmosphere's mind. It's like the Schumann is like a societal mood ring that, again, that a lot of people believe that the spectrogram gets plugged right into the atmosphere without anything that conditioning or filtering or any of that. And that's an important thing to understand, is all of the conditioning and filtering that goes in to make a good signal. The spectrogram is a composite, which is plotted in color based on information from the reporting dependencies. This is one of the differences between the Schumann and the spectrogram. The spectrogram is plotting an actual signal, which comes from the antenna detector. Schumann resonances are global electromagnetic resonances generated by lightning discharges in the cavity between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. The cavity between the ionosphere and Earth ground is called a waveguide. Schumann resonances bounce off the Earth's surface up into the atmosphere and then back down as how do I say this? Coming after lightning strikes. Schumann resonances are the echoes of lightning. So when a discharge, we call it lightning as just a kind of way for you to wrap your head around what's happening, but it's essentially a discharge from upper voltage to the ground. So when the ionosphere discharges into the atmosphere through lightning, but the lightning is often a lower, clouds. You see people say clouds and lightning, and there's a lot more that happens. The sprites and the elves and all of this stuff, whistlers and all of the stuff that happens above the clouds. So there is discharge between the upper atmosphere that stays in more or less in the upper atmosphere, that doesn't actually ground down into the earth, and then there's the discharge of the lower ionosphere and clouds that hit the earth, that discharge. Clouds are like sponges that hold electricity in them. And under the right conditions, those sponges, those electric sponges, will release and send a charge from up to down, from the ionosphere to the earth ground. And so it's these lightning discharges that we see represented here in the chart, in the graphs and the line charts. Okay, the cavity between the waveguide, I already said that between the ionosphere and the Earth is a waveguide. Schumann resonances bounce off the Earth's surface. They are not generated from within the Earth's interior. That's a different circuit. That's telluric currents, and those are much more powerful than the Schumann resonances. Lightning discharges are similar to striking a bell, which continues to ring. Okay, so the lightning discharge or the other releases from in the ionosphere, predominantly lightning, that is like hitting a bell. Bang! And then the bell rings. Again, Professor Schumann himself used that analogy. How could I not use the same analogy as the guy whose names are on the Schumann resonances? Professor Schumann himself, 1951, declared the Earth's atmosphere should ring like a bell. Then in 52, he tried measuring up. And then in 53, he finally got a good measure. Okay. So it's important to understand why I had one idiot viewer that I think I hid the channel from him. He asked me what kind of dumbass shit is that? You're talking about the bell. We want to know about the Schumann resonances. I hid the channel from him. Right? Sometimes the only solution to dumb comments is just to hide the user. Or block the user, but I'd rather hide the user. You don't need to see me at all ever after a dumb enough comment. Right? No dumb questions. There are no stupid questions. There are no dumb questions. Okay? The droids you are looking for are not here. Okay? Neither. There are no dumb questions. There are no stupid questions. However, there are a whole lot of really stupid comments. Right? What's the difference between a comment and a question? Question ends with a question mark. It's like a hook with a period at the end of it. Comment may or may not end in a period. That's the difference. Question always ends in a question mark. Comment, who knows? You know, dot, 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 hyphen, comma, semicolon. Question ends with a question. Okay. So, and as a result of the really stupid comment that I got from that viewer of why I'm, talking on and on about the ringing of the bell and likening the atmosphere to the ringing of the bell is because the Schumann resonances are that the ringing of the atmosphere, equivalent to the ringing of a bell, in addition to the fact that Professor Schumann himself used that analogy with his class, right? So if he used the analogy, how am I not going to use the analogy? Thank you. And any, again, further comments on the ringing of the bell analogy, I'll block you. I don't care. I'll read enough to know that I don't even need to hear anymore. You're gone. Thank you. So I deal with a lot of the problems. Just because you make some comment, I don't need to address it. I block, hide, all the same. No worries. No worries. I'm not stressed. Nothing personal to you either. I can be cold-blooded just like everyone else. More than some people even. Okay, so the waveguide, I explained that. Lightning discharges are similar to striking a bell, which continues ringing. The atmospheric resonance is a hum, is that which is recognized by the antenna, that subtle hum. It is therefore is that which is recorded on the spectrogram, subtle atmospheric resonances in the pico range. The spectrograph, I keep saying spectrograph, it's a spectrogram. Spectrogram machines in general, but the spectrograph, both, they do two different things, but they take a spectrum and break it up. I think the spectrograph is the machine, or the spectroscope is the machine, and the spectrogram is what is created from that, if I understand correctly. But spectro machines, and I usually abbreviate it for spectro, as spectro with a hyphen. In general, break down the range of the signals into constituent frequencies. They do that here, different range of frequencies, or portions of the overall signal with, period. With any spectrogram, it's important to get the information from the dependencies. What is it, the spectrogram isn't picking up, once again. The spectrogram is not picking up the data itself. It's analyzing what something else has already picked up. Okay. So with any spectrogram, it's important to get the information on the dependencies. How is the spectrogram? What is being fed? What, where is the thing? What is the thing that's receiving a signal, which is then sending it to the spectrogram? So the dependencies are the things that make up the information. It's the actual raw data. That's the best way to put it. Dependency is the data itself. It's the report from the hardware, but it's the conditioned report. Okay, the dependency is technically what's coming to, what the antenna is read, but it's still conditioned. So it's not the raw data. The dependency is not the raw data itself. Could be, but it's, in a lot of cases it's not. In this case, it's not. It's conditioned. And that's important to know. That's equally as important to know. If you're getting data, is it being filtered? Is it being conditioned? Has it been amplified? These are all important things to know in the processing chain of the information, of the spectrogram. Okay, and this is all standard operating procedure here. Okay, this is not, I'm not making any of this up. I'm giving you the standard way that the spectrograms and this stuff work. Choose to accept it. Believe it if you want to. It's up to you. I'm not here to sell you nothing. I'm just here to tell you how this works. For the sake of illustration, these graphs are reproducing. Oh yeah. The graphs are reproducing a phenomena which is otherwise invisible. So you have to remember that there's a little wiggle room here. First off, again, it's not plugged directly into the atmosphere. It's not a mood ring. Okay, first and foremost, the data is conditioned, it's amplified, it's filtered, so you get this. Okay, and you have to remember this is only a convenience. This is not the please. This is a convenience. Okay, you have to remember that it's taking something which is invisible, which you can't see, to make it visible. That's part of what the problem with the Schumann is a lack of understanding that it's not the actual data itself. This is conditioned data first and foremost. It's amplified, and there is a processing of it to get the invisible seen. So, like everything else, like there's a difference between the sound of a record and the sound of a CD. They clean the CD up. There's no pops, no clicks, right? The record itself has pops and clicks, but that's from a scratched record, okay? Or you might not. If you've heard the music before the scratch, you'd say, oh, okay, that's a scratch that happened afterwards, okay? There's processing filters, Audacity, I use Audacity. Before that, I use SoundForge. When I capture records or CDs, or I don't do this so much anymore, but when I was doing this for a living, I was capturing records, anything that had a signal, right? If I could get a player for an 8-track, I'd capture the signal into the computer, turn it into an MP3, which is an MPEG joint 3. Okay, so I would take the signal through the line, through the turntable. The record's got pops, skips, or whatever. So I edit out those pops and clicks. There's programs that remove the pops, or I can just kind of visually do it. I can kind of do it myself and kind of, one-to-one on the timeline, and edit it myself. The software will do that for me, or I can do it manually. However, okay, that once you start getting in there and fiddling with stuff, it's obviously that it's been kind of fiddled with, but we're just looking to get rid of the pops and clicks that come with a record. Okay, so filtering does that for a similar signal coming from the atmosphere, like the power main, so that you can understand that is a not part of the atmosphere, but it's part of the domestic, social grid that we have, the power. there's a lot of things, the industrial areas, the power, whatever. There's a range of influence from humans into the, into this, and like the pops and the clicks, they're environmental elements that we're trying to filter out so we can get to just the music. And I think that's a good way to put that, really, that we're looking to filter out the noise, the pops, and the clicks to get to the music of the Schumann resonances. Okay, 2.5.2, format. All right, this is a quote from Wikipedia. So they're talking about the format of the spectrogram. They're talking about technically a little bit of a technical kind of description of the spectrogram. Okay. And so, quote, a common format is a graph with two geometric dimensions. One axis represents time, the other axis represents frequency. A third dimension, indicating the amplitude of a particular frequency at a particular time, is represented by the intensity or color of each point in the image. There are many variations of formats. Sometimes the vertical and horizontal axes are switched, so time runs up and down, sometimes as a waterfall plot where the amplitude is represented by height of a 3D surface instead of color or intensity. So this is what you would call a waterfall type spectrogram because it's giving you the amplitude as a height. The frequency down here, your frequency is giving you the color intensity or the color dimensionality. Sometimes a waterfall plot is represented with height of the 3D surface instead of color intensity. The frequency and amplitude, I have to keep clearing my throat. It's very damp and dingy down here. I'm in the studio. It's in the basement. There's no air circulation. I have the fan going on in the background. Oh, good God. I'm almost 2.5 hours into this, and that's not including the prep time and all of that. The frequency and amplitude axes can be either linear or logarithmic, depending on what the graph is being used for. Audio would usually be represented with a logarithmic amplitude axis, probably in decibels or dB, and frequency would be linear to emphasize harmonic relationships or logarithmic to emphasize musical tonal relationships. Okay, so if you followed, hopefully you're kind of understanding something here. The format, this 2.5.2 section is really kind of a key to understanding what you're looking at with the spectrogram. The fact that they have it, they can change how these things are set up into the machine to give you different patterns. It just so happens that the one at Tomsk, for however they decided to engineer it this way, time runs along the bottom, okay? And your frequency runs along here, okay? Your frequency is up and down, but that is not the amplitude, okay? Because you have, again, the frequency is not going up. How do I explain this? The frequency here, the frequency over here, okay? This is not a kilometer frequency. Radio waves are measured in peak-to-peak measurement, and that's not what this frequency is. This is the Schumann resonance spectrogram. So what this is doing is giving you the horizontal frequency on this side, amplitude, height of the signal, is plotted on the vertical axis, okay? However, there's 3 different axes at work here, okay? There's this one here, the time, and then you have the horizontal frequency, which is going this way, and then you have the amplitude. So the amplitude that we have here on this chart is measuring the strength of the signal. Okay? It's the brightness, the intensity of it. There's different ways to look at this. Okay. This is the electric side of the signal. This is one axis. The time runs this way. Okay, time is running consistently that way. But the frequency, you have two different frequencies that are involved. Frequency A, which is the harmonics, which are horizontal, and then you have frequency B, which is the amplitude. You see the amplitude as a frequency, but it is not a frequency yet. It is on the frequency axis, going up and down. Okay, it's confusing. This is confusing, and I don't know if I'm making this less confusing. Okay, but you have to understand there's three axes. Even though it's a flat plane, there's three axes here, as if you looked at a painting where you had a building in the background, a little tiny building. You know from your experience, buildings aren't a little tiny thing. You know it's a big building. Okay, so because what should be a big ass thing is way in the background, you have a sense of depth. It's still on a flat plane surface. It's still a flat surface. There's still only two dimensions, but there's an optical illusion with the third density, the third dimension of this, of the intensity of the color. And the dark blue here, the dark blue is the far, far, far background. Okay, so whatever is lightest or least, the weakest in color information is further back. It's asleep. So the brightest color, the furthest up that you get is white and yellow. Okay, white and yellow give you the furthest, the closest in perspective. It's something that white and the yellow together equal to white mode, white. Snow, northeast snow white. The two of them together are backing, the yellow is backing the white, so you basically have two whites in essence. So this light color, as if it was a painting. I've given the analogy of a painting many, many times, and if you understand perspective, small things way back, dark things recede, and if you play with the dark and the light, you can get things to have, a variance of dimension to it. That's exactly what this is. That you have to look at the density of the color of the information as being further away. The dark blue is the dark blue is further away. The less, there's a lighter shade of blue, still lighter. The dark blue is the furthest away, and then as you start getting lighter in blue and then into green, it starts getting closer to the foreground. Okay, rust, the orange, the rust color, those are even closer to the foreground. The white, the yellow is the closest in the foreground. So if you can understand that, as it gets darker along the parameters of the colors that are available, it gets further away, and that's your perception of distance when we're looking at this. Third dimension, indicating the amplitude of a particular frequency at a particular time, is represented by the intensity of color at each point in the image. So when we talk about these different colors, or the orange, rust, coral, these colors, orange, rust, and maroon. There's this combination here with the yellow, some clear yellow in there as well. That's what this is talking about, represented by the intensity or color of each point in the image. So you see, anyone that's been around for a while, you know this, I break it down to the pixel. I go right in, scoot right in, and I can give you an analysis of, where it is with the voltage based on the dependencies, based on the color, okay? And that's part of what you have to kind of understand when you're looking at this, is the field of depth based on the color information. But you can only know that if you know that there's 4 primary colors, 3 directions that are possible, right? So 4 colors in 3 axes are what make the spectrogram. And essentially, the dependencies are the line graphs. So these 3 line graphs, each with 4 color possibilities, 4 color variances, give you the shape and the configuration of either the horizontals, the fat bands or horizontals, or the uprights, as I've just explained to you. Hopefully it made sense to you as I'm rambling through this. There's many variations in the form, and a quote, again, this is still a quote, there are many variations in format. Sometimes the vertical and horizontal axes are switched, so time runs up and down. Sometimes it's a waterfall. I think I read that. The frequency and amplitude axes can either be linear, or I think I've read this, depending on what the graph is being used for. Audio would usually be represented by a logarithmic amplitude axis, probably in decibels, and frequency would be linear to emphasize harmonic relationships, or logarithmic to emphasize musical tonal relationships. All right. So to see how this is what's telling you. You got to understand this. They're telling you how and why they set this up in a certain way of a certain type of spectrographic image based on the relationships they wanted to show you. So because they want to show you the Schumann harmonics, Schumann resonance harmonics, they're bunching this up so that the horizontal frequency is showing you the modes of the Schumann resonance. This is your fundamental harmonic, or your base harmonic, and then these are overtones. This is your second, your third, your fourth. These are basically the modes of the Schumann resonances here. The wave, the size, the wave of the size and shape of the wavelengths. Okay, and so in the description you can see where I gave the quote, Wikipedia spectrogram. Okay, and then there's also, on my channel, I have 3 basic introductions on the spectrogram itself. Okay, and those are in this essay. So those are something you might want to kind of review. I've talked a lot about the spectrogram. I've mentioned this other ways, other times, other places, what it is. This is a little bit further, a little bit more advanced, but I'm still also giving you some basic information on this as well. So if you go to the videos, and they're in order, 1, 2, 3, you'll get a lot of basic information on the spectrogram and what they are and what they do. If you have seen that already, this will add to what you already know on that. Okay. All right, so the orientation, 2.6 orientation. On the left side, as we talked, there's a frequency. This is the frequency of the harmonics. You got to remember, not the frequency of the wave itself. So they're bunching this up to show you the 7.8, this is 20.7, and this is 27.1, and this is that's 27. Oh, I'm sorry. 7.8, then that's 14.1, that's 20.7, and that's 27.1. All right. So those are the first 4 modes of the first 4 harmonics of the Schumann resonance series. On the left side, this is your frequency. 0 is up here, 40 is down there. There's 2 time codes. The white is the Tomsk local time, which I always go by, and then there's the UTC, which is based at Greenwich, England. I am Tomsk minus 22 hours, FYI. Orientation. Okay, and the bottom is 2 sets of clocks. One's Tomsk, the other is local time. And up here, this is your date. They give you this date here. The larger numbers, yeah. The large yellow numbers are UTC. Stands for, it's based in Greenwich, England, and it stands for Universal Time Coordinate. Tomsk is UTC plus 17. East Coast US is UTC minus 5. The spectrogram coloring is plotted from the reporting 12 dependencies of amplitude, 1 to 4 modes, quality, modes 1 to 4, frequency, modes 1 to 4. Okay? The at-rest fair weather state, the theoretical 0 state, is dark blue. The darkest blue is the 0 state of the canvas. So it's like it's a navy blue, it's almost a black. And so as information comes in, gets reported, it produces a color on the spectrogram based on the dependencies the colors that are coming from the dependencies itself. Earth's geoelectric powered grid. Okay, introducing Earth as a battery. It is well advised to consider the planetary sphere as a type of battery. Before I go on, take a breath. I need to take a breath. I'm going to have a drink of coffee. 2 hours, 30 minutes into this. I need a break. Okay. I'm back. It's well advised to consider the planetary sphere, the Earth, as a type of battery. 3 main components of the Earth battery are the upper DC circuit, lower DC circuit, and the AC circuit. Okay. DC is direct current, or moving in a straight line, or what I have referred to as a velocity, which is a straight line. AC is alternating current, or moving in a wave fashion. The upper DC circuit, this is basically the IMF, or the interplanetary magnetic field, which links the Earth to the Sun. This is the magnetosphere and ionosphere together. The upper DC circuit acts as a capacitor to hold a high voltage charge in the upper atmosphere. The amount of charge held there is somewhere between roughly 200,000 to 250,000 volts, kV. The AC circuit, this is the area between the upper DC circuit and the Earth ground of the planet herself. This is what I refer to as the waveguide, which is wherein the Schumann resonances stays active. Energy range of the circuit is pico electron volt and or pico Tesla. Lower DC circuit is the Earth ground of the planet herself. First primary layer of conduction is through the telluric currents. The water and soil of the planet conducts a current, which is the magnetic side of power, moving laterally through the planet herself. This is measured in nanoteslas. And so the ley lines, some people know about these, a lot of people don't. They're the internal way that the Earth kind of conducts its power throughout. It's a grid. And there are nodal points in the ley line system where power, the geoelectric power can consolidate and give you the ability for free energy in those places. The insulator or electric choke. Okay. Under normal conditions, the lower atmosphere is generally fine enough insulator between the 2 poles of the planetary battery, which are both measured in the nanotesla range. So the interplanetary magnetic field of the upper DC circuit and the Earth ground itself, okay, both of those are measured in nanoteslas. Schumann resonances are measured in picos. Battery poles. The upper DC circuit is 1 pole of a battery. The lower DC circuit is the other pole of the battery. Schumann resonances come from the discharge between 1 pole to the other. Usually, it's the upper DC circuit moving to the lower. However, the flow might move in the opposite direction from upward-facing lightning. There's an increasing amount of upward-facing lightning, or upward-heading lightning from the Earth to the ionosphere. It's a fairly recent phenomena that's increasing. As the magnetic poles are shifting and all of that, the Earth is actually a higher charge than some of the ionosphere. Higher current. 2.8. The 2 dependencies and the 4 modes of receptions. Okay. What is the Schumann resonance mode? The short answer is that the mode gives one the coloring information plotted on the spectrogram. Mode is a correlation. Okay. Hold, please. Oh, technology. Hold, please. Okay, I'm here. I love everything. I love everybody. It's all good. Okay. A mode is a correlation or comparison between the electric and the magnetic components to the EMF, the electromagnetic field, within measurable range of the antenna. Oh God, that's a mouthful. Because electricity and magnetism move as a requited pair, which I've called a requited pair, there should always be an inverse relationship between the amplitude and quality. Some type of relationship between that shows that they're hooked up together. Amplitude refers to the height of the signal, which is a coherent vector of velocity of voltage in electron volts. So the speed of the amplitude is a velocity. It is not a frequency. Each amplitude complex, and that's the hardware itself and the filtering chain. Each antenna complex reports 4 modes of amplitude, quality, and frequency. The antenna complex is recording a 3-dimensional configuration based on the signals received of the dependencies of the measuring hardware after being processed or conditioned. This is set up along the base, which measures, this is set upon the base, which measures the magnetics or the quality along 2 separate axes, like I said. One for north-south, the other for east-west, and they're usually some type of T, or they're squared off to each other. A mode is a presumed shape of the Schumann resonance electromagnetic wave. Mode is a mathematical description of the size and geometry of a wave, of the slope of a theoretical model within the processing of the incoming signal. That is for the measured range between 03 to 40 hertz for Tomsk. And I've done a video to explain how the modes work. This video, the description is in the location. I'm sorry, the location is in the description. Okay, modes 2.9. And I'm coming to the end. This is like the last part of this right here. Modes 2.9, modes, color information. Modes are what provide the coloring on the spectrogram plottage, depending on the parameters of the reporting hardware. Modes are inversely related between the height of amplitude and the width of magnetics, which translates to the direction that a color moves on the spectrum, in addition to the size and shape of the brush used to color the spectrum. Mode 1, and by brush I mean the size and the shape of what's printed on here, what's plotted on here. The different mode, and I explain this more at length. I explained it in the video. I explain this more at length in the next part 3 of this, of what I mean by the brush tool, which makes the pattern on the spectrogram. Okay. But just picture the mode is like a type of brush, which gives you a type of signal. It provides a type of pattern on the spectrogram itself, depending on the size and the shape, again, the slope of the signal itself. Okay, the brush. Mode, white is mode 1. This correlates to the highest layer of the ionosphere furthest away from the planet, where the purest voltage is held intact. White amplitude is the tallest signal, highest in voltage, most narrow in magnetics. Yellow is mode 2, which measures a lower frequency range or bandwidth than white. Red is mode 3, which measures a successively lower range of the signal than the yellow. Green is mode 4, the lowest frequency, largest in wavelength, between 10 to 100,000 kilometers in wavelength sizes. This equates to the green brush being the fattest and widest tool to plot a pattern on the spectrogram. Okay. And so at this point it says, thank you for reading, hoping your day is blessed. Okay, I'm almost 3 hours into this. This was significantly longer than the 18 minutes that it said. And so underneath this, I have the, as you can see, I'll show you right. I have in the website, I have all of that information there. As you can see in the website, that's not here. I got to change this information. I'm working on it. So okay. All right. So that but if you're there, you've got the information on the website. So there you have it. All right. All right. So this technically ends the video. This was a lot of information. I'm going to do an outro with some more music to help soothe the head, and I'm sure there's people. If I'm pretty sure going to do this as a premiere, and so I'm pretty sure there's people who want to chat, and there's always, and at least in my live streams or my whatever, there's always people that chat. There's always a lively discussion in the chat of the premiere or the live stream. There might be an ebb and a flow, but generally speaking, there is a very great conversation that happens in the chats, and I invite you to be part of it. All right, so before I head off into music and then say goodbye for the night, thank you for being here. Please comment, whatever you got out of this. I appreciate hearing from everyone. And if you ask me a question, I'll answer it the best I can. There's no dumb questions, only dumb comments. If you ask a question, it's like, it's sacred, like it's a sacred trust of me to answer your questions. I never make anyone feel bad for questions I ask that are the basic things. I try not to. It's not what I'm here for. And I want you to understand what's going on here. Otherwise, it's not, if you don't get something out of this, it's not fun for me to do this. I'm not here just for me doing this myself. This is a public service, but I'm not here doing this just for myself. If I wasn't doing this, I would be fixing bicycles. I assure you of that. Okay. So on that cheery note, thank you for being here. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm gonna take us out with some music. I'm not sure what else to say. My brain is a little bit kind of frazzled at this point. Just thank you all for being here. Those of you who've managed to be here, and those of you who will be here later after you've gotten the announcement that there's a premiere in progress, and you missed it or whatever. So all right, so a little now and a little later, as it were. All right, so thank you all for being here. Let me find the music. Hey, Mr. DJ, won't you turn this party down? All right, so we're going to do Mr. DJ. On here? No, we can't do it. Okay, all right, we're playing it in the background. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate, again, all the comments. Please comment. Ask me questions. Give me a reason to feel like I'm useful here. Yeah, it's great that I do this. However, if I've used a bunch of words that are beyond you and you're not getting it, then it's not anything, right? My work has kind of been, I don't want to say it's been in vain, but it's like big fucking deal. 3 hours worth of a video might as well be nothing if you haven't gotten something out of this, and I haven't heard back from you what you've got, what you've learned. What more do we need to go over, right? And so that's where we're at in this. And I want everyone to get this. So I've spoken enough. Everyone, thank you for being here. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you, I guess, at the premiere. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe I'll just go and sleep and post this tomorrow. Who knows? Anyway, on that cheery note, thank you all for being here. Much love. Thank you.
how things used to be. Yeah, we were young, our days were full of fun. We laughed and felt so free. Everyone said hi while passing by. We were one big family. Oh, I remember a brighter place, sweeter days. I wanna go back right away. I remember every time of yesterday. Yes, I remember. I remember a brighter place, sweeter days. I wanna go back right away. I
Good night, folks. Have a good rest of your night. Thank you for showing up.